Hello, everyone. I'm Alice, and I would consider myself an oil painting and watercolor artist. But somehow I've been saving since my childhood a lot of other mediums and materials that I haven't used yet. So I wanted to try for the first time oil pastels. To me, it's very important to create a space where I feel cozy and inspired and creative. And what always worked for me is aromatherapy. I don't know why, but it sets up a mood for me, and so I light up a candle. I put on some fairy lights in my room. I put on some cozy music, and I feel ready to start. At first, I wanted to try to paint these two photos, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the first one was too detailed for what I wanted to try, so I chose the second one. Because I didn't had any clue about what pastels to use, I decided to unbox them, clean them out because they were a little bit dirty from the last time I painted with them, which was in my teenager years. And so I swatched them in a piece of paper so I could see the differences between every brand I had. And it was really interesting. I realized that every brand has their own mix of oil and pigment in their oil pastels. I also realized that because of that blending, they probably didn't mix well between brands. So that was useful for me because I only had one white pastel in each package, and I knew that I was going to use it a lot. So it was useful to see which brands I could mix together in and which brands I couldn't mix to use the white one.
Ozzy.
I started by sketching out the main lines and shapes with a pastel pencil, and I thought it was the right thing to do that. I was already using pastels. And so the main reason was that pastel pencils are easier to erase or diffuse in case of mistakes. And talking about mistakes, I didn't really know how to start with the pastels, so that's why I wanted to take pressure off my shoulders by not recording the first steps. Because meanwhile I'm recording, I have to check the camera if it's recording properly or if it's in the right angle to record. So that's why I wanted to have a little intimacy with the pastels so I could learn by myself, and I will try my best to explain what I've learned through it. I had a recurrent question coming up to my mind meanwhile I was doing the swatches, and it was, how do I blend these pastels? Because I remember when I was a child in art class, I used to blend them with my finger, but then when I tried that in this painting, I realized that this didn't work as I wanted to because it dragged the upper layer of the painting and also all the pigments around it. So it made the painting look patchy, and it wasn't a look that I wanted to achieve. So instead of dragging them with my finger, I realized that I would much rather blend them with other pastels. And that's when pastel toned pastels came to the picture. And with that, I mean white base colors. So to blend everything together, I came up with this technique. I don't think I invented it, but this is what I came up with. And it was paying close attention to the photo reference and trying to read and determine every skin tone and undertone that I could see. So, for example, if I saw a shadow that had a hint of blue, instead of translating it into the painting with, you know, a salmon and an ivory and beige tones with a little bit of blue, I tried to put straight up blue in the painting. And that's just because of my preference. I really like vivid colors in paintings. I think copying the color palette of a photo, it's kind of boring, but that's just preference. And so I did a wash of colors of every undertone I could see in the picture. So, for example, redness on the cheeks, yellow maybe on the nose. I read the photo and tried to translate it into vivid colors, but just in a wash of colors. I didn't pressure too much the pastel. I did a little wash, and then with the pastel tones, which were white based, as white, salmon, pinks, grays. Even I had a mustard that had a lot of white in it, a muted one. So I used those white based colors to blend the vivid undertone tones. And I don't know if I explained that really well, but I tried my best. The thing is, you really need to be careful because depending on the pressure you put on the white base pastel, which is the one you're using to mix tones, you might drag the color throughout or you might blend. It depends. You can end up with straight up white or blending the tones underneath. So you need to be careful with it. You also need to keep in mind that if your painting needs really bright highlights, as for example, typically on the tip of the nose, on the tear duct, or even on the lips, you need to let the rest of the painting be a little bit darker so the highlight stands up more. Or even leaving a bare space on the paper so the white of the paper comes through it. And so, but also you have to swatch all of your pastels, in my opinion, if you're not used to them, just because depending on the brand, I've realized that because of the mixing thing I told before, because of the percentages of the mixing of pigments and oiliness in them, there are a lot of whites that doesn't appear white, but there might be useful for blending purposes. And there are other whites that if you press them into the paper, you can see a really good pigment from them. So it depends on the brand you have. You might have to leave the paper bare or paint with your pigmented pastel. Another thing to take on account is that you will need paper or tissue to clean every pastel every single time you use them. You might end up with pastels really, really dirty and saturated from other colors every time you use them to blend between other tones. And so, to make sure that you're using the color that you want to, you have to clean them every single time. Something I've learned through oil painting that I realized that I could also apply in oil pastel, and I think that you can also apply to other art mediums, is that if you're stuck in a painting and you don't know how to continue, because I don't know, maybe you don't know how to do the nose, it has a difficult perspective or a difficult lining or color scheme or whatever, I recommend you to divide the photo reference, and instead of, for example, seeing it as a portrait or a photo of two persons as mine, try to see it as a bunch of colors mixed together, a puzzle of colors. And so try to continue by applying those colors one by one in the painting. And then little by little try to clarify with shadow and light every single item or feature of the face or the hair. Try to, for example, do a little bit of lining, for example, in the shadows of the nostrils or the lashes, the eyebrows, the the lines of your mouth, everything that has to do with darks and shadows in general will make your painting look more contrasting, and you'll see how defined your painting ends up looking. So don't worry and keep going. Trust the process. This was really weird to learn, but I don't know why eraser can erase oil pastel, and it doesn't make any sense to me because it's a oily texture, so it should drag out the pastel, but it erases it. I mean, it could drag it out because if you are trying to erase a spot that has a lot of pigment in it, a lot of pastel build up, you might drag it out. But if it's a thin layer, I'm telling you, you can erase it perfectly. and this is the final painting. I really enjoyed doing it. Hopefully my video was useful and you've learned through my mistakes and process. And I also hope that I see you soon in my next video. Bye!